If you have your Bibles, you can be turning over to John chapter 5. Have you ever heard this? It's too late. For a lot of us, sometimes it's hard to believe that. Many of us have gotten to the point, though, at some point we believe the lie that Satan wants us to understand is one of his favorites. No matter what's going on in life, no matter where you are, it's just too late. I think the longer you believe it, the truer it becomes for you, doesn't it? It's like two adult siblings in my family who seemed not my brothers, but my parents' siblings. They never seemed to would be in the same room. They never would reconcile. Why not? As I got older, I asked one, and I said, "Why don't you ever go to the same place? Why don't you ever spend time with your family?" And here's what I was told: it's too late. Or a couple I know of that is going through a divorce, and they've only been married 3 months when they decided it just wasn't going to work out. And I said, "Why don't you try to reconcile? Why don't you try to get things where they need to be?" And they both say this: it's too late. Young teenage boy, his parent was talking to me not long ago, talked about how their son had been locking himself in a room, shutting himself off from his parents, and even blocked them on Instagram and these kind of things, you know. And when they said, "Don't you think you need to be trying to reach out to him?" We think it's too late. Or maybe the husband who comes home and he kicks back in his lazy boy in the evening and he just watches sports, and the thought crosses his mind that maybe, just maybe, what if I prayed about some of the things that are going on in my life, that things may get better. And he wants to do that, but then he feels awkward as he begins to do it, and he feels like he's missed an opportunity, and he begins to tell himself, it's just too late. Or how about the kids are now too old to make things right, or my marriage has gotten too cold, or the addiction has gotten too powerful, or my reputation is just too shot. It's just too late. I think that's the lie that many of us are believing in our own life in many different areas, no matter where you are today. I think at some point in our lives that many of us have gotten to this point where we are quite frankly stuck, for lack of a better way of putting it. And for many of us, we don't believe we can ever get unstuck, so we choose to stay where we are. I mean, maybe it is a dull marriage. How can we spice it up? How can we make it any better? Or maybe it's that dead-end job that many of us feel like that we're in, and maybe for some it's a sin or an addiction. The cycle seems to never end, does it? Maybe we have tried everything we know of, and we want it to change, but for whatever reason, it never seems to work. Well, John 5, we find this man who must have felt this way. He's been for 38 years, 14,000 days have come and gone in his life. If you ever thought about it that way? And if things were going to change, maybe they would have happened by now. Well, this day he meets Jesus and everything changes. I want you to read with me in John 5 as we look in verses 1 through 3 and then verse 5 to begin with. Here's what the scriptures would tell us. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for a feast of the Jews. Now there was in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and at which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Now, here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. Now, 38 years is a long time to be crippled. I mean, not being mobile. I mean, just kind of just stuck where you are. Things are not what they need to be. Not sure when and how it happened to the point where he's now at the pool, but he's gotten to the point where now he doesn't even think that's going to even work. And he might begin to say, and someday, you know, he goes there and initially he says, today's the day, things are going to happen. He's very positive. Today's the day, the water's going to be stirred. I'm going to be the first one in. Things are going to get better for me. But after years of things not changing, he begins to thinking it's too late. And so verses 6 through 8 tell us this. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I am trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat, and walk." Think about what Jesus has said. Do you want to get well? I can imagine the sarcasm in this voice of this man when he says, "Sir, don't you understand? I've been here, and every time I try to get there, nobody's here to help me. No, I'm just lying here by this pool working on my suntan." And have you ever felt like Jesus is asking you, do you want to get well? And you're stuck in that same thing that you've been stuck in for so many years. Over and over and over again, you're working on it. And when he says, "Do you want to get well?" you want to say, "No, I'm just as happy as I can be right here." I think the longer I'm in ministry, I understand why Jesus asks this question. I mean, I often find myself asking the same questions when people come to me. A lot of people like to hang around the pool, but they don't really want to be healed, so to speak. If you understand what I'm getting at, a lot of people may even come to church, but they don't really want to change. They just want to come hang around the pool, hoping that maybe they'll get their miracle, whatever it may be that would take place in their life, and then everything changes, but I'm not willing to do anything to make any difference on my side. I mean, a lot of people open and read their Bible, but they're not interested in doing anything differently by what they've heard or read. They don't really want to be healed. Can I say that they really like things the way that they are? Maybe this man had kind of given up hope. We could understand that. I want to give you 4 reasons today why maybe we don't want to change. Number 1, fear of change, quite honestly. I mean, just being fearful. I mean, after all, the predictable is safe, isn't it? I mean, at least we know what's going to go on. Even if we don't like it, it's predictable, and I can be comfortable in it. I mean, it's not a great marriage, but it's marriage, you know. It's not a great future, but it's my life. I can deal with that. It's just the way it's always been. We seem to settle with what we know versus understanding that we can make it so much better with God's help. We just get to the point where we just want to accept what's in front of us. I'm okay with being the kind of husband or father or wife or mother that I grew up seeing, even though it wasn't the greatest example. It's what I know, it's what I'm comfortable with seeing. So as a result of that, I will just continue to do that. And it's not the best, but it's easy because I've already seen a lifetime of role models for what it is. Now, we don't want to risk this idea of change. Even if we have maybe not seen everything we need in our life to change, it isn't great. There's some benefits to staying near the pool, so to speak. Can we consider that? I mean, maybe you've known people who kind of have this Marty McFly phenomenon going on in their life. They get sick, and it seems like maybe this man, he gets sick, and his wife treats him nicer when he's sick. She's doting on him. "Honey, is there anything else I can get for you? Here, let me bring your dinner. Here's your breakfast in bed. Is anything else can happen?" So he just is content with being sick versus getting well, because after all, my wife treats me so much better when I'm this way. I'm okay being this way. We know that it's comfortable. It may not be the best, but it's comfortable. In our old church, for a time, Amy had a good job, and I was doing well at preaching, at being the preacher, I think. Things were going okay, but I knew it wasn't the greatest fit that there was for me. And, I wanted to do what God had gotten me into ministry to doing, and that was I wanted to help people that didn't know Jesus to get into a relationship with Him. And I wanted even those who thought that they were in some type of covenant community with God that wasn't getting closer to them to draw closer to God. And so as a result of that, I continued to do the same thing over and over and over. And so as a result of that, it took a few years before I really began to look for these opportunities to do what God was calling me to do before I would even consider an opportunity to talk with people like you folks at New Testament Christian Church about how to expand my personal ministry so that I can do what God's called me to do. And I have to ask myself, why did we wait? I mean, I'm glad we're here. I was asked this morning, are you happy? There's a difference between being happy and joyous, but yeah, we're happy. And I've got joy within myself because I understand that God is allowing me to minister to people's lives and their needs. And so, yeah, and I believe God has put us together, but then I have to ask myself, why did we wait? I mean, what took me to the point where I was willing to be open for change in my life? And what kept me from doing that? Can I be honest? Fear of change. Just like the things that you go on have in your life. I mean, have you ever avoided an opportunity because you were afraid of the change that might take place? Here's another thing that maybe causes us to not want to change, and that is simply denial of reality. I mean, here's this guy in John chapter 5, and he's surrounded by sick people. You ever think about that? I mean, here he is. The only people, this is not like the community swimming pool. People are not laid out in their bathing suits. They're not walking around, jumping off into the pool, woo-hoo, splashing around. Everybody's getting out and swimming around and pushing each other in, playing Marco Polo. These are all a bunch of sick people. And they're only hoping that the water will be stirred at some point in time so that one of those people can get in, get well, get out, and go home. And the rest of them are left lying there. They didn't want to realize how difficult things really were. Now, I read about a 34-year-old woman sometimes back that had a 300-pound tumor removed. Not 30 pound, not 3 pound, a 300-pound tumor removed. Now, at some point in time, this lady had to figure out there is a problem. There's an issue going on, and when basically 2 more people are growing on your body, there is an issue happening. And when she was asked why did she wait, here's what she said. I thought if I left it alone, it would get better. It's just going to take care of itself. And I think that's what we many times want to do. We deny reality. I mean, you consider maybe with time, my marriage is just going to get better. It just needs more time. Or maybe with time, my finances will get better. I'll be better at managing money. Well, if you don't take any steps to get better at managing money, I can promise you your finances are not going to get better, even if you give it more time. Or maybe with time, my child's going to change. He or she just needs more time. Or maybe with time, the addiction is going to get better. It just needs more time. No, if it gets more time, it just gets worse. If we don't ask for help. In reality, the tumor is just getting better, bigger, no matter what it is. In your life, that tumor is growing if you don't take steps to make it get better. And so then, at some point in time, you realize, I've given it time, it seems not to be working, and so it's hopeless, it's just too late. And I think that brings us to the third reason why we would get to the point where we would not change. We're ashamed of our condition. Huh? I mean, you keep the secret of that tumor from growing in our homes. It's easier to say it's too late than to tell a friend, look, I am struggling and I need help. And so as a result of that, things get worse until finally we have to say it's the end. I mean, consider you have to humble yourself to ask for help when there's a problem in your life. If you don't do anything to take steps to ask for help, things just continue to get worse. I mean, no matter what it is. I think a common question that I often get asked in ministry, and it is this one. I've got this friend, and would you call them because they're going through a difficult time? And I have to be honest, sometimes I do on occasion, but most of the time I don't. And here's why. Because they haven't recognized they've got a problem, and they haven't asked for help. And so even if I offer that help, being a complete stranger, most likely they will turn it down. And so we have to get to a point where we acknowledge that we need that help. If a person isn't ready to acknowledge the situation and ask for help, not much you can do for them. And same it is for you. My dad was an alcoholic. I love my dad. Don't get me wrong. But he did not give us the best life in the world. I was 14 years old before my dad recognized he had a problem. Here's what he said, the only way he acknowledged it. A friend of his who he hadn't seen in a while one day said, "Hey, Fern, have a beer with me." And my dad said this, "I can't, because if I drink one, I'll drink a case." Up until then, he always said, "I don't have a problem. I can quit whenever I want to. I don't have any issue. It's your problem. What are y'all getting on my back about it? I'm doing that just fine the way I am." And so no matter how many times we pointed out that he had a problem or he was struggling with something or did he need help with something, he would say, "Leave me alone." And a lot of times it's because we're ashamed of our condition. And it takes ourselves humbling ourselves to acknowledge that we have this condition. Finally, I think that brings us to the next stage, is that we're afraid of action. I mean, once we find out that we need to change, there's something going on in our life, we get stuck, we're paralyzed by what's been going on in our life. Now, if I want to change it, I've got to take action. It simply doesn't go away on its own. It's like the lady with the 300-pound tumor. It didn't go away. It continued to grow until she asked for help. And we know that if we ask for help, well, guess what? It's going to take some action. I was having a conversation just the other day about people with weight loss. And it's a big issue with people because, I mean, let's just be honest. I didn't put on 30 pounds in the past week. Why do I think I'm going to take it off in the next week? And so if it's something that took a while to accumulate, it may take a while to get rid of. No matter what it is that you're dealing with and what you're struggling with, it would be all wonderful and great if we say, "I just prayed and gave it to the Lord and it went away." God says, "I'm there with you. I will take it away," but you need to be in the process as well. And oftentimes that's going to require us to take some action. Here's what Jesus told the guy. He said, "Stand up, pick up your mat, and walk." He didn't simply say, "Well, just be well." First thing Jesus says, if you really want to receive what you got to do, you've got to take the first steps. I want you to, first of all, stand up. I want you to then pick up your mat, and then I want you to walk. You see what he's done? It's one thing to get the guy where he can stand. I know a lot of people who can stand, but he couldn't lift anything. They've been weak in condition. They've had surgery or whatever the case is, and you can get them to the point where they can simply stand up and get off the side of the bed or get out of a chair, but he can't walk. They wouldn't be able to lift anything because their body is too weak. And Jesus says, you see the steps you got to take? First of all, you got to learn how to stand up. The next thing you need to do is then take this mat that you've been lying on, and you need to be able to be strong enough to carry it with you. And then I want you to walk. You see, Jesus doesn't automatically say, poof, everything's all well. He says you need to be willing, if you want this, to take a little action yourself and follow through with it. Do you want to get well? You know what the guy says? I can't. Nobody's helped me into the water. It's like the rich young ruler. I'll get it out in a minute. Teacher's sitting down front. I want to make sure I get that out correctly. When he comes to Jesus, he said, "What must I do to get eternal life?" He didn't say, "What must I do to be saved?" He said, "What must I do to get eternal life?" And Jesus says, "I want you to go sell everything you've got, and I want you to give it to the poor." You know what he said? Basically, when he walked away sorrowful, and he says, "I can't. I can do anything else, but I can't do that." And I think that was the interesting response from this guy initially. Doctors Manerth and Meyer, they wrote a book entitled "Happiness is a Choice." Now, they're psychiatrists. And here's what they said. As psychiatrists, we cringe whenever our Christian patients use the word can't. Any good psychiatrist knows that "I can't" and "I've tried" are merely lame excuses. We insist that our patients be honest with themselves and use language that expresses the reality of their situation. So we have our patients change their can'ts to wants. I just can't get along with my wife. And no, they have them say, "I just won't get along with her." I just can't encourage my husband. No, I just won't encourage my husband. I just can't get over my spending habits. No, I just won't change my spending habits. I just can't give up the addiction. No, I just won't give up the addiction. I just can't find time to pray. No, I just won't pray. And if you can help people change their can'ts to wants, then they stop making excuses. Because can't or tried, well, they're not much of an excuse. There's a sense that in which this guy's right, though. You consider what he's done. I mean, for this man, I believe he's really telling the truth. I have tried. I mean, I get myself here. I drag myself here. I get friends to help me here, but they can't stay here all day. They never know when the water's going to be stirred, and so they can't. I mean, they've got to make a living. They've got to care for their families. They've got to do whatever. They can't be with me all the time. And look at all these other people. This guy over here is blind. He don't even know I'm in the area. This fellow here, he couldn't hear me when I cried out for him. This other person here, he's lame. He's got his issues. He's got his affliction. He can't help me. Nobody can help me. So I genuinely believe he was telling the truth when he says, I did everything I could to this point, but I can't do any more. Now, at some point in time, I believe all along, he may have been crying out, the water's stirred. Come give me a hand. Help me get in. The water's stirred. Come give me a hand. Help me get in. The water's stirred. Come give me a hand. Help me get in. And then maybe one day he gets there and he sees the water stirred. Nobody's helped him. And he says, I'll just wait till the next time. And so he skips a day. Then maybe tomorrow he goes, the water's stirred. Come give me a hand. Help me get in. Nobody helps him. So then he goes a couple more days without, even when he sees the water being stirred, he even asks for any help. Till finally, he's resolved to just lying there watching the water stir and not even trying to get help. You see what happens? We get so tied up in being paralyzed that it just becomes, no matter what it is that we're paralyzed by, it just becomes a way of life, and we choose not to then take any more action. Now, I'm going to pick on us men for a little bit. Studies show that men are less likely to ask for help than women. You know? Now, that's surprising insight for most of us, I guess. You know, after all, I mean, I'm the first one to ask for directions when I'm traveling. Yeah. But it's even true for medical care. I mean, we're less likely to go to the doctor and less likely to be forthcoming about our symptoms that we're dealing with. You know, we go to the doctor and we say, well, when I go to the doctor, you know, if I would go to Dr. Amy, say, well, ask him about this, or why don't you ask him to do that, or, you know, or if, and then we go to the doctor, how's everything doing? How you been doing? Fine. Doing just fine. How have you been since last time we seen you? Not much different. And come in like this, you know, dragging your leg. What's wrong? Ain't nothing wrong with my leg. Just going to sleep a little bit. That's all. I was sitting out there. You made me wait too long in the waiting room. But here's what happens. I think it's one of the reasons that men live an average of 7 years shorter time period than women. Now, us men like to say, see, it's not our fault, it's their fault. It's the reason we die quicker. But the reality is we just don't ask for the help we need. So Jesus acknowledges this man is sick, and the man acknowledges that he needs help. And the man, however, is still focused on the pool. He's not focused on Jesus. And this is where I struggle with the church. I think sometimes the people come to the church, and it's the pool, and they're just waiting for the waters to be stirred. And Jesus is right in the midst of it, but they fail to see him. And they fail to ask him. And so we come looking at the right place for the wrong thing. You see, there's 38 years, there's no change, and then this man met Jesus, and everything changes. I don't want to end this little message without also helping you understand that there's this little odd twist that's taking place in the story now. We think it's a great thing. Jesus tells the man, okay, you know, you're waiting for healing. I'm here in the flesh to help you get to where you need to be. Be healed. Get up. Take your mat. Walk. Just that simple. The guy, he gets up. He takes the first step by simply getting off his mat. Then Jesus says, now take your mat. Okay? First thing I need to understand is I can stand. So if he told me I can stand and I can get up, I'm up. Okay? I'm going to bend down. I'm going to grab my mat. Wow, I picked up my mat. He rolls it up, sticks it under his arm. Jesus, now walk. And he does it. I want you to read with me now this next little passage as we close today. In verses 9 through 11. It said that once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and he walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. And so the Jews said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "The man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" Now, this guy has just had a miracle. It's an incredible thing that's taken place. He's walking around. People recognize this is the fellow that laid around on the mat all the time. He couldn't walk. He was lame. They got that. They didn't celebrate. They said, "Woo-hoo, what's happened to you, brother? We are so glad to see you up and about." Oh, you know what they focus on? They focused on his mat. In other words, you know what they were telling him? Lay back down. And have you ever felt that way when you've come to the pool? You're trying to get rid of whatever it is that you're dealing with in your life. You've been paralyzed by. You finally feel like you're being released from it, and all of a sudden, there's those people who are all around you saying, "No, that's a good thing to happen tomorrow, but today, you need to lay back down. You're not allowed to do that now." They didn't say he couldn't be healed. They just said, "You can't do it now. You're not allowed to carry your mat today. You can take it tomorrow. You can carry it any other time." They just said, "You can't do it now." They were so focused on the ritual of religion that we talked about last week. They failed to understand this man had now started a relationship with Jesus. And you and I need to help understand this guy had been healed. The religious leaders said they can't do it. God says you can do it. No matter who it is in your life that's telling you that. Some of you had people in your life maybe like that. Even though they are the people you should be looking for the most encouragement from in your life, sometimes maybe they're the most discouraging. And so you've already felt so discouraged by them, you finally just give up and said, "It's just too late for me." But let me tell you, with Jesus, it's never too late to ask. You know, Mary and Martha in Scripture, their brother Lazarus was sick. He finally dies. They go to Jesus. They said, "The one you love is sick. You need to come." And Jesus waits 4 days to go. Now, they wouldn't have hunted him down unless it was real bad. But they hunt Jesus down. They come to him and said, "You need to come quickly. He's not doing well. He may not last." Jesus waits 4 days to show up. And he didn't make it on time. And so they are despondent. They are already having a funeral. There's mourners there. The sisters learned this great lesson. With Jesus, it's never too late. Jairus in Luke chapter 8, he has this 12-year-old daughter, and she's dying. And Jesus heals her. And he lets him know with him, it's never too late. The disciples, they've been fishing all night long on this lake, and they've finally just given up. They've gone back in. Jesus says, "Go let down your net on the other side of the boat. Push out the deep water on top of that." And they do that, and they find out with Jesus, though we've tried as hard as we could to do everything we could in our own power, with Jesus, it's never too late. The thief on the cross, as he was there dying, with his dying breath, he says, "Remember me when you come into your kingdom." He knew even in that hour that with Jesus, it was never too late. Now, I think maybe you and I need to learn this too. If we're stuck, we need to come to accept it. We need to realize that we don't always have to be what we've always been. And with Jesus, he wants to whisper the truth to us just like he did to those people. It's never too late. You remember last week I gave you a little card. You remember? All of you remember? Yeah? Oh, 2 of you. 3 of you. Yeah, good. 4, 5. Okay, 6. I want you to do something for me. Have you written somebody's name down on it yet? Next week, all of you, if you don't have one, please grab one on the way out today. And what I want you to do is I want you to write a name on there. It could be someone you know. It could be your name. And next week, would you bring it back because we want to pray for them. And we want them people, even if it's you, to realize it's never too late. But you must be willing to take the steps. Get over the fear of understanding that for things to get better, sometimes they may need to be able to change. Quit denying the reality of the situation that's going on, that sin is killing people. It may be killing us. And accept that what we're going through maybe, just maybe, needs to get over to the point where we can say, it doesn't have to stay this way. And if you're stuck, if you're paralyzed by whatever it is that's going on in your life, let us help you see Jesus in a way that you can say it can be so much better. But you must be willing to take the steps. We're going to be singing our closing song. As we sing Trust and Obey, I don't know where you are. I don't know what's going on in your life. I know for many of us, as I talk to even people in our own congregation, that we are paralyzed by many different things in our life. There are people from those novice Christians to those who have known Jesus for a long time. We're all struggling with things. We've all got our problems. And for some of us, maybe it just started out. For others, we've carried them for a lifetime. And God says, I want to set you free from that. And for some of you today, He's just simply saying, stand up and walk and come to me.